Well, thanks for staying with us. As I mentioned, the News Gang takes a break today. They will be back next week. But did you know that today is the World Whistleblowers Day? And of course, one of the key discussions around that is, despite the recognition that whistleblowers are crucial to society, the fight for their rights remains full of hurdles. Even today, if you know that there's a financial crime happening in your workplace, what can you do? That's the discussion I want to have with my guests who have joined me here in studio today. From my far right there, Dr. Mary Kimari, Assistant Director of the Advisory Unit at the Commission on Administrative Justice, also known as the Office of the Ombudsman. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Next to her is Okiya Omtata. I'll call him a public litigant for purposes of this discussion. He has other titles which we can talk about another day. Karibu sana, Okiya.
Asante.
And last but not least is Sheila Masinde, Executive Director at Transparency International. Sheila, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Sheila, let me start with you straight off on this one. Anything to celebrate as the World Whistleblowers Day comes to an end, at least here in Kenya?
In terms of whistleblowing, I don't personally have much to celebrate, particularly because when you look at where we were 30 years ago, when we had David Munyakei coming out with the Goldenberg scandal, and then almost 15 years ago with the Anglo leasing, actually more than 15, and looking at some of the whistleblowers of that particular case and the treatment that they have received in this country, not really celebrated, but finding themselves more ostracized, isolated, left to fight their own battles, and really carrying the repercussions and, reprisals of whistleblowing. And then now more recently with some of the more recent cases on whistleblowing, I think that we still have a long way to go, and also the fact that we don't really have that much needed comprehensive whistleblower protection legislative or policy framework to ensure that those who risk life and limb to report any acts of wrongdoing or misconduct are protected. So I think there's still a lot to be done, and also sad because, behind every prosecution or investigation case, whether it's corruption or other criminal offenses, there is a whistleblower. But without then this very rigid protection mechanism for whistleblowers, then it means that there are many cases of corruption not coming out to the fore, corruption or other offenses, because people are reluctant, hesitant, seeing what the likes of Munyakei, the likes of John Githongo have gone through in the fight against corruption.
And I'll come back to you a bit later on to talk specifics of some of those examples and other whistleblowers that you've worked with. But for you, Dr. Kimari, from a legal perspective, where are we with our laws that underpin a sort of a whistleblower's culture in this country? There's one bill, for example, I'm told that's been in court in Parliament for a very long time. Talk to us about that.
Lovely. We have the whistleblower protection bill in Parliament currently. We expected that this specific Parliament would actually pass it to become a legislature. But that does not stop us from the protection of the whistleblowers. From the Commission on Administrative Justice, we have the Access to Information Act 2016. Section 16 is very clear on the protection of disclosures by any person. And to a large extent, we've been using that to try and ensure that the whistleblowers are protected, regardless that we're yet to have the Whistleblowers Act.
Maybe be a bit more specific. You may not go into all the details, but what sort of protection would a whistleblower get today as per existing law? If I had something I wanted to report, how would I be protected?
Good. Now, definitely, when we talk about whistleblower, you're talking about disclosures. Certain disclosures, either against a public institution or a private, some of the private institutions that we have. So when you come to the Commission on Administrative Justice and report the same, we pick it up and carry out an inquiry to try and find out whether, in fact, whatever it is that you're telling us is actually the position, because we still need to protect the other party against misrepresentation or misleading facts by the person who is giving the information. Once we confirm that, in fact, whatever complaint or whatever disclosures that you made are factual in nature, then we try to protect you by ensuring that you're not reprised at your place of work. Remember, one of the fears that we have when you talk about whistleblowing is being suspended, is being fired, is being given more office work or hours at the place of work, etc., etc. So we come in very strongly to ensure that your rights are still protected. And and ensure that you're in a good working environment.
Dr. Kimari, thank you so much for that. Okiya Omtata, some have said that you are a public whistleblower and you go to courts and that's where you blow the whistle, so to speak. What are your thoughts on World Whistleblowers Day today and the progress made? Are you confident that whistleblowers are safe in this country should they choose to go public with the information they have?
First of all, I think it is good that we have got a day dedicated to whistleblowers. They play a very, very important and vital role, maybe I should even say most critical role in crime busting and fighting crime, the whistleblowers, because they're usually insiders who give information that something is going wrong. In terms of Kenya, it's a very, very sorry state of affairs. They are left onto their own devices.
Whistleblowers are left to their own devices?
Yes. There's hardly infrastructure to protect them. When you talk about lossy laws, where's the infrastructure to implement the laws? There's hardly that. And you can even begin from cases like that might even go at a personal level. Even when you look at the way victims of rape are treated. They are basically whistleblowers when they go out and say, I've been raped by this. But look at the way they are treated usually like they are the offenders. And today, the unfortunate thing is that even the judiciary is not protective of whistleblowers. Do you know that before I lost my 10 teeth, I got information I was going to be attacked, and I was in court and I applied for protection, and the judge dismissed it, and 2 days I was lying on the street almost dead. You see? So whistleblowing in this country is, I think there's just a culture in law enforcement that does not comprehend that people get exposed to danger when they come out to help law enforcement. Then number two, our courts are stuck in a time warp, whereby they fail to realize that an individual like you and me, who are citizens of this country, are qualified to receive information from a whistleblower and hand it and use it. So they want a whistleblower, you see that somebody working, so a whistleblower is scared to go to the police. He may trust somebody who is not within the public service or whatever to disclose information. But you can hardly act on that information because the courts want you to disclose the person. You see. So, and if you reveal this person,
you get them in trouble.
You get them in trouble. You get them in danger. They can even lose their lives. But most of the time, they lose their jobs. They are looked upon as the, I don't like using the expression, but I may use the expression, as the black sheep in the organization, so that the corrupt have a field day. And the whistleblower is like an outsider. And if I may give you an example, some time back, a story carried in the media whereby I think some chap was working with the central bank, something like he landed to his home with some big amount of money, and the mother was concerned, and she turned the guy over, and she was condemned. How could you do that? So that was a case of a whistleblower. So even society has no provision for whistleblowers. Then the other problem with a country like Kenya is that we are a very small country. We are a very small country, and we may need to, it may not be possible to protect people within our borders.
Okay.
So a country like the US is big, and they have got a program whereby they can even change identity of people and move people across from one state to another state to another end. In this country like Kenya, it may be very difficult to provide fiscal, other than maybe helping somebody get into exile and supporting them outside their borders. Yeah.
Sheila, jump in off the back of what Okiya has spoken about. Two cases I know you followed very well. One is regarding the country's at least best-known whistleblower, John Githongo. He's still in court over a matter he blew the whistle on many years ago, and he's challenging a fine that the court asked him to pay on the same. When you see instances like this, and you've been following others recently, and feel free to refer to them, does it inspire confidence for those who may be watching the program tonight and saying, I have some information I'd like to reveal, but as I listen to your panel today, I'm not sure I should?
Well, not to deter anyone who has any case or matter that needs to be brought to under the public eye. In terms of reporting, I don't think we want to discourage that. It's just a concern that many times when one raises these issues. You do it at great personal risk, professional risk, you know, for people who end up being demoted or redeployed or lose their jobs entirely, because there are many cases around that. But it comes at a great personal risk. That's the reality, and that's why I said it takes a great patriot to actually make that decision to, you know, bring out and highlight a case of wrongdoing because of the challenges or, you know, the other stories that we have in Kenya of whistleblowers. I mean, David Munyakei died a destitute. You know, he lost his job at the central bank after blowing the whistle on Goldenberg, and basically lived on handouts from well-wishers. I mean, we were part of, we had an initiative where we were fundraising for his family even after he died for many years, because they were unable to fend for themselves and he left behind a very young family. But you wonder whether, you know, what happened to him, that isolation, that stigma that was attached to him because he blew a case of that big case of Goldenberg, had anything to do with how his life ended. Just going to that case of John Githongo, I mean, the court awarded damages amounting to 27 million that he was to pay to the former internal security minister for mentioning him in that particular whistleblower record that he made on Anglo leasing, and the court found that it was wrong for him to come out publicly with that information, and so he was that hefty award was given to the former minister, and he challenged that in the Court of Appeal, and I think that the appeal court came up with a judgment, was it just about last month, where they reduced the damage to around 10 million, but still that is someone asked to pay from his own private pocket for damages, yet it was something that he did, you know, for the public interest. So it is a bit concerning, and I agree to some extent with Okia in terms of how well do our institutions, you know, like the judiciary, for instance, understand, you know, the concept of whistleblowing, that when you're blowing the whistle, you're actually doing something for the public good. And so for Githongo now to be asked to pay this amount of money, even if it has been reduced, it is still a lot of money for something that he did just for the public interest. So that, for me, raises concern on whether we are encouraging citizens, public officers to come out, for instance, with cases of corruption, because I think that is actually a deterring factor.
And even more recently, you've been working with the whistleblowers in the Mara Heist story. What was the latest on that?
Well, I know that in that particular case, the person concerned is Spencer Sankale, and the main whistleblower in the Masai Mara case, which Citizen TV highlighted, I don't know, is it 3 years ago or so? And he lost his job exactly a year ago, on June 17th, 2021. And so he's been jobless, actually, for the last 1 year. I know that some of our partners, like Amnesty International, have tried to, you know, give him some form of work so that he can have an income and be able to fend for his young family. But then it hasn't been consistent, so he doesn't have a regular sustainable income at the moment. I know that he's also pursuing the matter in court. He challenged the dismissal because he says that he was not given fair hearing by the institution when he was relieved of duty. So that matter is in court, and we supported through legal, you know, advice, and we are actually attached that case as an interested party, just to give the story of whistleblowing and give the facts around that. So I can't speak much about it, but that's really the status
that's the latest in the same regard. Yeah. Dr. Kimari, you gave a rosy picture of how the country supports whistleblowers, but from what I'm hearing from the other guests on this panel, there may be laws, but the structures to support those laws don't seem to be in place, and the political goodwill or administrative goodwill to support whistleblowers beyond, you know, the normal. Can you respond to that?
Sure, I may, but before I do that, perhaps I just comment on the Mara Heist. I know that came up, and we picked it up as a Commission on Administrative Justice. In fact, we undertook an inquiry and later an investigation, and we managed to resolve the issues as they were. Now, on the other aspect of having the gentleman having been dismissed from work, that's a different ballgame. And I think we have to wait for the courts now to make a decision on that because of the various issues that arose based on whatever charges that were placed against him on that matter. But on the aspect of whistleblowing, I know the Commission came in very strongly. And I note our chairperson even made a statement that we're dealing with that specific matter, and we did to our best of our ability. Now, we may not have the regulations, Waihiga, but I always say we need to work with what we have. You note that various institutions have a policy on how to deal with whistleblowers. So nothing stops us from using or from coming up with a certain procedure, a certain way of dealing with whistleblowers at our own organizations. If we have to wait for this specific act to become an act, then it means all this time there's going to be an injustice. And I would be advising those who feel that they need that legal backing to come up with a procedure to refer to the Access to Information Act, Section 16. Refer to it, use it to create a policy, a procedure that will help you at your place of work to protect whistleblowers. We all cannot be in the same basket and insist that this law is not, we still do not have a law on whistleblowers and just sit still. We need to do something. Before the law comes into play, we have other measures, or we need to be creative enough to come up with other measures to deal with whistleblowing. So it's not rosy.
Are you telling me that tonight, if a civil servant is watching and they say, at my workplace, I know there's something going on that doesn't make sense from a legal perspective, what avenues of redress do they have through that, the structure you're saying we have right now as we wait for that law?
What I like is I'm here today to actually clarify on that. If somebody feels that something is going wrong somewhere, the first person that they need to be reporting that is to either their commission secretary, if it's in the commission, or the head of that institution. If they feel the same is not being taken care of, they come directly to the Commission on Administrative Justice. In fact, that's the reason we exist. Other than addressing maladministration, we exist for access, to enforce access to information. So whatever disclosure that you're giving us that has a negative impact to public interest, that has an impact or that infringes on a human right, that has an impact or that is able to show an aspect of abuse to office, we are going to protect you on that to ensure that your employer or that institution does not in any way harass you or reprise you for the information that you've given us.
Okay, Mtata, we're at an interesting time in our country, a critical point in the war on corruption, the transition between one government and another. We know that whatever happens in either September or later on this year, there'll be a new government. And some say transitions are sometimes dangerous times because exiting public officials could take advantage at a county level, at a national level, to enrich themselves as they leave office. Is that something you think we should be worried about tonight? And are there structures for those who may be watching this happening and they want to blow the whistle on it?
I think if you remember the narratives that came out during the handover from the, what was it called, the Nusumkata government to the Jubilee government, there were these allegations of what transpired in the office of the president, whereby colossal amounts of money were supposed to have been carried in bags and stuff like that. So transitions usually result in that kind of misconduct. But I think, unfortunately, right now, we do not have a committee. I don't know if the committee on the transition has been established, and the stocks of the various officers have been taken. But what I know is that usually during transitions, as has been the transition, the practice since we went into multi-party democracy, the changeover from one government to another has resulted in some looting of public funds. But I think most corruption, I think, for me, may not be just that. Because nowadays you find that the way our budgets are basically done, money tends to be tied to projects. The only thing that is really of issue for me is what they call budgeted corruption, where money is tied to ghost projects from the initial point. So this budgeted corruption and then corruption on the revenue side become to be the issues to be watched, because usually the way expenditure is designed is getting a bit difficult for one to pull off a corrupt deal through expenditure. But right from the time you begin preparing a budget, you can factor in ghost projects, which you can use to skim money from the public. Yeah, and that's to me would be a major concern, that That may be there. And I remember also the money that was supposedly stolen at that time during the transition from the Kibaki administration to the Uhuru administration was mainly through the police account, which was used to get money out of the treasury, out of the central bank. So it was not money that was project money that was stolen. It was money that was kept for things like operations. The police account is open to operations and things like those. So they drew money using that account. That's the money that was supposed to have been carried in sacks.
Also, it was alleged. I don't know if it was charged.
That's why I'm using the word supposed to have been carried in sacks. But the important thing is that with the police account, which is an account that is used for operations, with no caps on it, but the other funds, there was no evidence of any other funds being looted during the transition, other than maybe where people had already budgeted for corruption and then they used the opportunity.
This budgeted corruption is very interesting, Sheila, and I don't know, is that the reason why Kenya's ranking on the global corruption rankings doesn't change too much? And I know TI do this every year. If our laws are getting tighter, if we are seeing more arrests, why do we still not move out of the... I think last year we were position 128 out of 180 countries on that corruption ranking.
124, but
124.
Yeah, but don't lay so much emphasis on the positioning, because the position is determined by how well or poorly other countries are doing. So you could have actually registered a lower score than the previous year, but still do better in ranking. So I think what you need to focus on is a score. And for 2021, Kenya scored 30 out of 100. On a scale of 0 to 100, 0 being very low, meaning very corrupt, and 100 being very clean. So that means we basically are at E, if I was to assign a grade. And we've been oscillating between 25 to 31, between 25 and 31 in the period of the Jubilee administration. So going forward, going back, going forward, going back. So meaning that we've not really been consistent in our efforts to tackle corruption. So yes, despite the legislation, which is good, there are various legislations that have been implemented, but we're also struggling with many of them. We've talked so much about leadership and integrity. We've talked a lot about the weaknesses in the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Act, the Public Officers Ethics Act. I mean, there are so many legislations. We have the institutions. But then I suppose that what we are not really looking at, there's something, like now what Okia has brought out, that whole new phenomenon around budgeted corruption, that by the time you're seeing a budget, it is well padded, that monies that are supposed to be, cutted away are already in there, and so quite formalized, and so it's really even hard to track. So that's where the corruption is happening. That's where the heists are being, conducted. But I would say that we really need to look at strong prevention mechanisms. I think that we've focused so much on the legislations, the policies, the institutions are good, but we really also need to look at prevention efforts. And whistleblowing is one of the most key, prevention measures that we can make in the fight against corruption, because by the time someone is blowing the whistle, either that offense or that particular heist has just happened. There could have been more that could have been stolen, but then it then serves as a disruptive measure. You're able to disrupt that particular crime. So you end up saving a lot of resources. Like I imagine in the case of Masai Mara, there could have been more that could have been stolen. And I know that there were attempts to even highlight other cases of corruption that happened even beyond, the first case that you highlighted on Citizen TV. So for me, whistleblowing is one very strong measure that we have not really looked at. And I think we need to encourage this, because it's one strong prevention measure. There are many others in terms of, social audits. How do you get citizens involved in the social audit process? Of course, the challenge that we have faced is access to information, and Dr. Kimari is here, and I think she's also touched a little bit about the access to information legislation. But the fact is that you still walk into government offices or write to them, and they won't give you that information. And okay, is here. He has taken many cases to court, SGR. Even for us, we also wrote to ask for information on SGR in 2013, and we were told that is classified information. Despite the fact that
you are told that the information is freely available. Yeah. And we went, and after I spoke to your predecessor, Mr. Kimeo. Is it called Kimeo? Yeah, he told them material is freely available. So we went around and I was able to pick material from Parliament. I used it in my case, only for the courts to strike it out as confidential. And yet the same government, Cyrus Maina, he had written to Transparency International, telling them, you don't need to give this information because the information is free, is out there. Then I take the information, I use it in court, the courts land on me that I've stolen information, irrespective of me producing the letter from it. That's why I'm saying that some of our courts are stuck in a time warp. This constitution is too ahead of these courts.
I wish we had a representative from the judiciary here. I think you'd have wanted to speak to them directly. In the next 1 minute, because our time is almost up, Dr. Kimari, there's another agency called the Witness Protection Agency. How does it work with your commission, briefly?
Now, we have a good working relationship with the Witness Protection Commission. However, with the whistleblower bill not being an act yet, we're yet to start active referrals to the Witness Protection Agency.
Okay.
So we are yet to get into active engagements.
All right.
But we have a very good support mechanism from the Witness Protection.
Okay.
But not enough money. Sorry, can I just say that?
Yes, go ahead.
I know one
your final word.
One of the struggles has been the issue of financing. I know when we've spoken to the Witness Protection Agency and they've talked about the challenges around financing.
And safe houses. Are there safe houses now to protect?
Well, the doctor can tell us. But there's a big issue around financing. And that's why, for me, I think we would want the next administration to deal very conclusively with these issues around whistleblower protection. I've looked at the manifestos so far. There's all these beautiful things that they want to do on anti-corruption, but no one has really elaborated what they want to do on whistleblowing. And remember that the Jubilee administration actually had promised that they would offer more, ensure that there's more protection, more reward, more recognition for whistleblowers. Okay. But 10 years later, there's really been nothing. But we want we should actually challenge the candidates to actually define what they're going to do, particularly in regard to whistleblowing, because a strong anti-corruption measure. Okay.
I told you last word, but safe houses, is that a provision we have right now?
May I not comment on that, Wahiga, because that is under the Witness Protection Agency. Remember, the Commission on Administrative Justice.
Okay.
Once we start working, that is one of the areas where we'll also try to find out the kind of safe houses, the kind of structures that they have. So that as we make our referrals, then it becomes effective. Okay. So let me not comment on that.
No comment on that. Okay, finally, we've seen you, I think, on the campaign trail. Should the voters in whatever region you're campaigning in give you the go-ahead, what happens to the public defender Kenyans have gotten to know?
It will continue to be, enhanced.
It will be enhanced?
It will be enhanced.
So you're not stopping, you haven't taken a break?
No, I'm not. I'm just enhancing what I'm doing. Because that will be a platform for me to be able to use that office to access information.
Okay.
Yeah.
I won't allow you to campaign here, but I just wanted to ask you that question.
One problem we have right now is access to information, she's saying, but some of these offices can enable you to demand information and get it. Yeah. So I'll not be ignored when I ask for information if I have the Senate seat.
Sometimes you now feel you are ignored. Dr. Kimari, what's the last word? Did you have?
I was just saying, as he says, he has people now to help him to get information.
Yes.
We are glad that he appreciates us now and he knows us.
Okay, yes. Thank you. Dr. Mary Kimari, the Assistant Director, Advisory Unit, the Commissioner on Administrative Justice, a conversation we'll keep having. Okia Omtata, I'll call him a public litigant for purposes of this discussion. And we've also had Sheila Masinde, Executive Director, Transparency International. And I hope whistleblowers out there and those with information have heard what they can do to help their fellow Kenyans, help their country by volunteering that information, the best ways to go about it. And that's how we wrap up this discussion this evening. This has been a special edition of Tonight. As I mentioned earlier, the News Gang has taken a break, but they'll be back next week. My name is Wahiga Mwaura. I've been sitting in for Yvonne Okwara Matole. On behalf of the whole team that's made this broadcast possible and our sign language interpreter today, Wilson Mushora, thank you for tuning in. Thank you once again to my guests for joining us. And for you, wherever you've been watching us from, have a good night. Stay safe. We'll see you soon. Goodbye for now.